Go ahead, Joseph Violante.
Yes, I believe that the city council needs to act as a catalyst, needs to help these parents organize. We do need to get back into the courts, and the only way we're going to do that is to get the school board, get the county, get the plaintiffs in that party back in there, sit down and discuss it. One thing we must be concerned with too, and I know I'd like to see my children go to school in Bowie, but two little black girls brought something home to me when I was talking at Bowie High School, and that is that there are people out there that would still like to come to Bowie schools, and I don't think that we can just cast them aside. I think there should be some provisions to, and not force busing, but volunteer busing in some extent, to allow these children that want to come into this community to go to school, allow them to do so.
Mr. Jack Jenkins?
It's been my privilege over the past few years to serve on the Committee of 100, which is the Oversight Committee on Desegregation. And it has been frustrating because for a long time I didn't sense a change in attitudes. I'm sensing a change now. I'm sensing a change in two ways. One, in terms of demographics. This is now a predominantly black system. Two, in terms of attitudes. I think people are focusing much more now on quality education as opposed to color. I think the city of Bowie can and should serve as a catalyst in bringing these groups together, both on an interfaith and an interracial basis. And in fact, in our meeting with our education committee a few months ago, we gave them that directive to reach out and serve as a catalyst between these organizations to begin to seek an end to court-ordered busing.
Thank you.
Richard Dahms.
Thank you. I read in the Bowie Blade that Mayor Logue has pledged to end school busing as if it's in his control. So Mayor Logue, I'd like you to explain to us how you're going to deliver on your pledge.
You'll have to ask Mrs. Schutte. She wrote the headline.
Mrs. Schutte doesn't write headlines. Mrs. Schutte writes stories.
Mr. Rouse wrote the headline.
Mr. Rouse. Okay, Mr. Richard Paget, did you want?
No, I think you've heard the answer. A solid consortium involving all of the people involved, county, state, etc. Everyone really is interested in quality education now. It's very important for the next generation because they're all looking forward, hopefully, to good jobs. The problem we notice, however, and it was on television last night, as a matter of fact, it was interesting. They said that the income difference between senior citizens and the very young in the workforce is actually growing larger, that the real income of the younger people is going down. And so that represents a substantive problem. So I think people are looking for quality education to get the jobs they need to have.
Okay, now here, does anyone want to cover this before we get on to something else?
Yeah, you went by here.
Mayor Logue, I'm sorry.
Just let me say that I think the role of the City Council is one of leadership, and whether it be through the vehicle that Bert mentioned or some of the other ideas, we need to, number one, get the act as a way to provide the information. We're talking about $11 million or $10 million. We're talking about 11,000 students who are forced bus, and we also need to know that we need to find out exactly what it is the plaintiffs want in order to go back into court, because I'm not sure anybody has identified what it's going to take to satisfy their needs before we can go back into court. And before we can identify that, I think we're wasting our time. But the way to do that is communication, and I think everybody here has pretty much said the same thing.
Okay, Mr. Twigger and then Mr. Oliver, as fast as you can. Did you want to?
I already responded.
Okay.
Yeah, I did too.
All right. Now, we have a minute, I guess, or two. I want to ask one question, and what I would like from you is not a long story, but maybe a yes or a no and 3 or 4 words to explain it. Some county school board members are seeking separate powers for tax assessment and collection instead of relying on the county for most of its funding. What do you think of the idea of the school system in Prince George's County having its own taxing power? Mr. Paget.
I think that whole subject is worthy of debate, and I think that question should be taken to the people that have to pay for it, the citizens of Prince George's County.
Mr. Dahms.
That question ought to be answered by referendum.
I'm concerned about that. I have some serious doubts that it would work.
Clearly, it's got to go to referendum. Here's one no vote.
No referendum. No, we must have a referendum.
Well, I agree. The citizens should answer that question. It should go to the citizens.
Absolutely.
citizens, absolutely citizens.
Well, this relates back to when I was talking about public initiative, referendum, and so forth. So there are times when you all agree that we should have a referendum.
It's a great responsibility.
Thank you.
You know, about $500 billion
Okay.
a year.
Well, that will end the debate. We've spent 2 hours at it. I think we've had an interesting time. I think we've covered almost everything. We promised that we would touch every subject. I'm not sure we hit them all, or we hit them all the way we wanted to, but I think we had a broad range, and we had a chance to see some differing opinions rather than amen corners, to quote a favorite of Mr. Robinson. Now we need to go. We need to go to a PSA because we have a tape change to go, and after that we'll go to Pat Whitaker, who will announce a special event following the show.
And now my closing comments, gentlemen. That's all from me. And thanks to our crew members here, by the way, which made this rather complex show successful, I think, to a great extent. We failed in some instances trying to use some high tech too far beyond this, but we tried. Thank you. To our professional, Mrs. Schutte, Terry Schutte, who is a columnist, political reporter, and commentator for the Bowie Blade News, to give us a beginning to this instant analysis. Terry?
Well, I think the disagreements among the candidates, with the exception, of course, of Mr. Dahms, are largely on the margins. I think that was apparent Tuesday night when they debated in another forum. I think it was more or less obvious tonight. But there are some real choices which the people are going to have this time, and I think, you know, they've had them before, but they're more stark this time in a couple of cases, it seems to me. And I think that the program did a pretty good job of bringing those out. They didn't quite focus in on the difference you were trying to make, Dick, which was too bad, about the difference between business and development. But to a large extent, I think they pretty well staked out their ground on where they stood and what their differences were. I think if people watched, they could also get an idea, and I think this is important, an idea of the way people relate to each other, how the council could function if all these people came together. I mean, you don't want a warring mob up there every Monday night. Fine disagreement, but, you know, people have to be able to work together and to disagree without being disagreeable and all of that. So, you know, I think a lot of that came out tonight. I was sitting watching most of the time. I thought it did.
Dick, what do you think?
Well, I think that we did try. We had the objective of trying to identify the differences between the candidates, and I think that we did do some of that, as you point out, not as sharply as I'd hoped. I think, too, that in this particular exchange, where there was a mix of the personalities, people could assess, if not on the issues, they could assess at least their personalities and decide whether they just plain simply liked someone or did not like them, or whether they thought they were competent, or whether they thought they were on target, whether they were reasonable. With respect to whether there should be a difference of opinion on the city council, I've maintained for a long, long time that there should be something like managed conflict. You can't have absolute war on the council, because then you'll get nothing done. But I do believe that I think the council, in this particular instance, is going to change its complexion from what it had been in the past. I think there is, regardless of who gets elected, I feel that there have been sufficient differences and divisions that we may have some different points of view expressed in the future on the city council. A little more action on that city council than we've had in the past.
I thought for a minute you were making a prediction. You said, you know, it's going to have a different complexion. But I guess
No, I wouldn't dare do that.
Well, you know, I guess it's the same thing that you're saying. I find that this council really is representative of the city of Bowie, which to a great extent happens to be an extraordinarily homogeneous community. And as a result, our representatives here and the candidates, in effect, project that same thing. Also, the fact that we don't have any real cleavage, any real opposition on the council to many things. Some people even think that what they do is build a fort around themselves and defend each other when they're all incumbents instead of opposing each other. I don't think that's so, but I do think that they all think alike in most instances, and I agree with both of you that this is the first time in a long time that I've seen even a little bit of a cleavage that's starting to occur. And unfortunately, it might be misunderstood, because it appears to be the city people, the city council in most instances, and business. And I really don't think that there is that much difference between what they want.